Welcome to Everything CPA and Private Equity, where we unpack the evolving relationship between accounting firms, private equity, and other strategics. I'm David Wolfskehl.
And I'm Phil Whitman, and we've chatted with more than 150 private equity groups. We've actually closed over 40 transactions with those private equity groups, and we're bringing you firsthand insights from the front lines.
And whether you're exploring your first deal, putting your toe in the water, refining your strategy, we're here to guide you with real stories, expert advice, actionable takeaways. Let's dive in. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Everything CPA and PE, where we're here to educate leadership teams on what's going on in the industry to help people. You know, we just came back, the three of us, and we're here with Dave Kells, leader of our profit team and former COO of Sitch & Cooperman, and Phil. We were all there, as well as with Terry Putney and Mary Ardith on our team. And the Private Equity Summit was a really exciting thing for all of us. And one of the things that I came away with, still lots of education for the CPA firms. They are excited but unclear what it looks like for them and their firm. So today we're going to share some insights and some thoughts around the PE Summit, maybe announce a little project that we're working on as well. And very excited. So Phil was the co-chair, so he was the man on the stage, delivering lots of messages. So Phil, welcome. Any thoughts? And why don't you start with some thoughts about the summit?
Sure. Great to see you, Dave and David. And one of the things I'm going to start with is, you mentioned that, education. And as everyone knows, I mean, we're all about education first. And the thing that strikes me, okay, so this was the second year we had the conference. The first year, even though we had about 300 attendees, there were about 150 CPAs from a variety of CPA firms. Same thing this year, there were about 150 CPAs. But even if we, for a second, may believe that it was only one person from each firm, that would mean that 300 CPA firms received a pretty good, solid education about what's going on. And what to me is troubling, and maybe troubling isn't the right word. Obviously, a lot more than 300 CPA firms know about what's going on in the PE arena. There are approximately 300 CPA firms that have actually participated in some sort of investment, whether it's with a wealth management firm, doing an ESOP transaction, but we're only at 300. Plus, we had those 300 attendees. So even if we said, okay, there was no overlap, 600 people or 600 firms have a pretty solid education. What I would be alarmed about is those CPA firms that just take a call from one and are only familiar with one of the, what I'm calling 31 different flavors that are out there, because they're not getting a full education. And perhaps the time that I spent with Charlie Weinstein, CEO of Eisner Amper, first firm to take an investment from private equity, it was very interesting. We were talking about all these constellation models, and even now the ones that are saying, hey, we'll take a CPA firm as long as they have 500,000 to 2 million, not of EBITDA, of gross revenues. He thinks that firms should be very cautious, especially at those lower levels. And we have always said there are going to be winners and losers, and there will true winners in that room and true losers in that room. And we'll talk more about that in a bit.
One of the things that you said, solid education, Phil. I had four follow-ups with firms, in the $2 to $8 million range. And I think although they had access to solid education, I think many of them left just as confused. Now, they might have learned a few more terms, right? It might have gotten to more clarity for them. But I think the four firms that I followed up with, I would say they left feeling, oh my God, there's a lot to this, and I'm not sure about it. And although they invested time to get that education, I'm not sure they're solidly educated yet, if that makes sense to you.
It is very overwhelming when you think, okay, I'm looking at these big firms up there. We had Michelle Thompson from Cherry Beckert on a panel speaking about their transaction. Charlie Weinstein was there, so we had some of the really big ones. And then we had all these constellation models, and some give equity at Topco and some give it at the local level. And even though we dug in and we gave hey, here's what the flow of funds is going to look like, what a transaction is going to look like, I think there is a lot of confusion before you get to clarity. And I think, obviously, you need a Sherpa. You need someone to take you up the mountain. And some are only going to get to base camp. Others are going to go all the way to the peak. But what I will tell you is it is very confusing because there are so many different models, so many different ways of handling working capital, so.
Yep. Topco, Bombco. So Dave, you were there and, why don't you share some insights as well from your perception?
Well, I could tell you I agree with everything you're saying, and I'll take it one step further. When you say overwhelming, that's just tip of the iceberg, because there are, you say 31 flavors. Obviously, it's like, as they say these days, drinking from a fire hose. I talk to many firms that say, yeah, my phone is ringing off the hook. My inbox is just piled with, solicitations on, hey, we can help you. Well, Phil, you hit the nail on the head. I think they need a guide. You said Sherpa. They need a guide to take them through it. And this is what I've been talking to firms about. You can't underestimate the education aspect. And David, I agree with you 1,000%. They came away somewhat educated, but there are so many nuances to how a strategic buyer approaches this. And Phil, we talk about this all the time. We're talking to pension funds, wealth management groups, family office money, small startups that have funding of one shape or another. And I say this all the time. Everybody and their brother's trying to buy an accounting firm. Doesn't mean you're going to do it right. We know what right looks like. We know what needs to be done. So people need to continue the process of educating themselves, but also not leaping at that first offer, like you say, not jumping at the biggest check that gets written, really educating. And I think it starts internally with a firm saying, what do we really want for our people, our brand, our legacy, and find a partner that you can truly align.
I'm sorry, David, but one of the things, I had a call last week, and it's now the second time I heard of this, a CPA firm that took a meeting with a private equity group and said, you know what, I'm going to bounce this off my largest client. I meet with Joe Blow all the time, and I want to see what he thinks of it. And the client, a fairly sophisticated large client, said, oh, why don't you forget about that? We'll back you. And in this one case, the client bought 90% of the equity of the CPA firm. But now here's the challenge. What does that do for your back office? How does that get you out of the administration? How does it provide you with additional time? Highest value use of your time. And I think that the money looks so good that certain things are forgotten about. And I honestly believe this firm that I spoke about will make them part of a special project that we're working on, because I think that right now, while ownership has taken some chips off the table, I don't think they have figured out how they unlock future value in their CPA firm and additional benefits for their clients and for their staff. This is not something that you're going to do it once in your lifetime. And there's a whole lot of education, and there are educated folks out there that you owe it to yourself, your clients, your staff to be having conversations, becoming fully versed before just making a decision based upon dollars and cents.
And I think sometimes the dollars are so big, that's like, holy cow, somebody walked into it and so I'm going to deal with that because the dollars are so much bigger. And the reality is those dollars might be great, and they might not be great in today's market, even if they're overwhelming compared to what was going on 2 or 3 years ago. Dave, it's been just about a year from the first PE Summit. I know recently you closed a deal from a relationship that you met at the first PE Summit. So again, we don't want to ever disclose names and things of that nature, but why don't you share a little bit about their education process through going through this and how you impacted that?
Yeah, I think so. It was a year ago, exactly like you say. I think it was night of the first night. We were talking about the sessions that had gone on during the day. And these side conversations where I give a little more in depth as to the process, our team of experts that have gone through it, gave them comfort that this is a client first organization that's going to help me through this process, see around the corners that I can't see. They're going to do a transaction. They're only going to do one transaction. They want to do it well. They want to partner with the right group. And so I laid out for them a program where we just introduce a couple different flavors of what these investment groups are looking to do. And while we're doing those intro meetings, I said, why don't you do some really in-depth soul searching as to what you want to do as far as taking care of those clients and staff that have been with you and gotten you to this point. Really look at what your runway is as far as how much you want to continue in the business, doing what you do best, doing what you love to do, shedding some of that administrative burden, and then took them through the process of conversations, due diligence, transaction scheduling, and the whole integration process, right? Because it doesn't just end with a check, it actually begins at that point. And so they were grateful for the upfront education and even more grateful for along the way, hey, let's take a breath. Let's debrief on what we've done. Let's do some side-by-side analysis. They got multiple offers from multiple, interested groups. And then we took them across the finish line. And it was their pay. I tell people all the time, if you're interested in selling, it's your show. It's your pace. You could craft whatever transaction you want because there's a buyer out there that will align perfectly for what you need and want to do. So we took them through that process and it was successful and everybody was happy. So
Dave, you said something and it struck a chord with me when you said you could craft whatever kind of transaction you want. We've talked and we had a guest on here where he actually put together his own letter of intent and then went out and he shopped it to find someone. Now he was looking specifically for minority investment. And that's another flavor, other firms that will be willing to not do a majority investment. Now those minority investors clearly are in the minority. And when they do a minority investment, in most cases, there are control provisions that are just as strong as if they took majority investment.
Although, Phil, I just met with BlackRock after the PE Summit, and they'll also make a debt investment. So if you're looking for something with, lots of cash that you can behave like a PE firm in many ways, right, and use that for acquisitions, they'll take a very small minority and really be your bank as well. And again, different
yes.
solutions.
By the way, I think maybe you met with Blackstone because Larry Fink at BlackRock is spending all his money on Bitcoin. But Blackstone, I know they were at the event and they are now the owners or investors in Citron Cooperman, it's kind of amazing when you see the largest perhaps in the world wanting a bite of the CPA firm profession. I think for years, CPA firm partners, managing partners, CPA owners really didn't look in the mirror and sense the value that they were really providing. And I've had conversations as I do. I probably speak with an equal number of private equity partners, probably 30 a month. I also speak with 30 managing partners every month. And the thing that I can tell you is private equity is here to stay. And I think even some people say, well, what's going to happen when the multiple gets to 18, 20? Look, veterinary practices in the right environment went for multiple in the low 20s. I don't know if we'll see that in the CPA firm arena, but I truly believe that even if we got to that point, someone would say, okay, where does it go from here? The truth of the matter is, even at that level of a multiple, there's still significant dollars to unlock, whether you're a pension fund and looking for, hey, we could provide our participants a guaranteed, 7 to 10% return on their money by being in this CPA firm investment. I think it's very powerful. And one of the things, and I think I shared this with you, David, next year, the Private Equity Summit, we're going to be devoting more time to talking about how this is good for the young folks, the up-and-comers, and the future partners. And I have always maintained, if I could be me, a 63, almost 64-year-old, or that 42-year-old partner that's going to get multiple bites. And look at Citron Cooperman just as an example. They've already had their second bite. There are some young partners there in 3 to 5 years. They're going to have a third bite. And when I talked to Charlie at the private equity conference, I said, do you ever sit back and imagine, through your leadership, the lives that you've changed, the money that you've put in people's pockets, even before you did this PE transaction? And he said, with this transaction, the money is crazy. I mean, for those young partners, I'd love to talk to any young partner that has any doubts about why this is bad. You're not looking at it the right way.
Yep. And in fact, we have a meeting with somebody who is saying, an older partner who is saying, hey, for the younger partners, it's not good. And we have a meeting to talk to the younger partners, not to educate them so that they can make a decision that's best for them. So Dave, as we wrap up, you talked about just closing a transaction, and we talk all the time here about multiples, top co, bottom co. It's great. But I think let's finish this with talking about something that sometimes gets neglected in all this stuff and all the barrels of money that's out there. How important is chemistry and culture, and how important was it to the transaction that you were talking about previously?
Well, it's so important that you don't really get past the first meeting, which is usually the first dance or the first date. So, as humans, I think we all get a vibe. We all get a feeling of, do I want to take the second meeting or not? And then you really start to, and I go back to soul searching, right? These sellers really then start to say, okay, what do I really want? And then we go back to the first group or the second group we met with, and then you start to refine what this is going to look like. And that's kind of where I came in. I said, you got to start thinking about, what is this going to look like 2 years, 3 years, 5 years down the road? And if that doesn't come through in these early meetings where you put aside the numbers on a page, I always say that the buyer has to solve for something. What are we going to do together? It's not what are they going to do? It's what are we going to do together? So buyer and seller come together, craft a plan, and it's culture all day long. It's what do we want to look like in 3 to 5 years? What is our collective plan? And so if you're aligned in that and culturally it feels right, that's the key to the whole thing.
If you don't have that chemistry and culture, you might have great plans, but friction every step of the way to create those. So Phil, any final comments from you as the co-chair, as the man of the moment at the PE Summit?
Yeah. So first, before I dig into some of those final comments, I do want to let our listeners know that, the good Lord above gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, and at Whitman Advisory, we're listeners. And as you can see, Dave Kells on his screen, Dave is the host of the Independent CPA Firm podcast. So whether you're looking to remain independent or you want to explore, and even if you are going to remain independent, I think you should explore this. Not that you are thinking, hey, maybe I will do a transaction, but you ought to know who your competitors are going to be in the future going forward and what they're thinking about. And one of the things that I know is there are clients that I'm working with that it's their desire to remain independent, and they're taking a page out of the playbook from these private equity groups that they've met with. They're acting as if, hey, we're going to be like the private equity group. We're going to acquire firms, and we're going to professionalize our back office. And at Whitman Advisory, we're here to help with all of that. Getting back, though, the Private Equity Summit, the Monday after the summit, very happy. Had a meeting with Dan Hood at Accounting Today, together with our other co-chairs. We are going to be doing the event again next year. I believe it's going to be the same week, the week before Thanksgiving. Mark your calendars. And we are going to be expanding it to 2.5 days. There's going to be a full day that's just going to be education for CPA firms. And then it'll be like the normal conference where it'll be private equity and CPA firms and sponsors and, others that are interested in this topic. We believe that 2026, they're going to call it the year of the turn, even though 2025, we saw our first one. They believe that there are going to be maybe 3, maybe 4. I do believe that in the news, we saw that some of them are just going to be continuation vehicles, which won't be, second bites of the apple as huge as they would be as if it were a transition to another private equity organization or another buyer. But we do anticipate a lot more activity in 2026.
Well, thank you, Phil, and thank you, David. And to our audience, appreciate the questions and the comments we get. It helps us shape our next podcast, so please keep them coming. If you like it, please like, subscribe. Those help us get it to more people, and we're helpers. There's nobody, I believe, on this planet who's talked to more PE firms about the CPA marketplace than Phil, right? He's over 240, I believe, maybe over 230, all with different hypotheses. And the reason that we continue to meet with new firms is we want to bring you the best opportunities that are out there. And sometimes it's the new folks that have the better idea, sometimes not. But we spend a lot of time educating ourselves organizationally. Every 2 weeks, a PE firm comes to our team, presents their plan, gets asked probably harder questions than they frequently do when they're presenting it to firms. And so we're all about education. If we can help anybody, we're here to help. Phil and David, thank you again. And everybody, go crush your day.
Thank you for tuning into Everything CPA and Private Equity. Every episode brings fresh insight. However, there's always more to talk about. Don't miss an episode. Subscribe wherever you watch podcasts. Have a question or topic you'd like us to cover? We'd love for you to reach out to us. Together, we will help you navigate this dynamic landscape so that we can help you achieve your goals. Until next time, keep making moves that matter. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.